Hey guys, Jimmy here. I wanted to give you a update and some of my thoughts on the Buga Shpere carbon dating report that's just come out, a scientific report into the age of some of the resin. Let me give you some background of this case and why this is significant, some of the criticisms and some of my thoughts on it. So the Buga Shpere was first sort of shown to the world by Jaime Maussan, allegedly filmed and then recovered and then tested, and all sorts of things have happened since. It's been quite sensational. There's been a lot of criticism. The main criticism at this point is we don't really know who this guy is. The scientific testing doesn't appear to be very scientific, and there's really no chain of custody involved in this case. Why it's interesting and significant is because dating back, I mean, centuries, certainly decades, we look at World War II and the Foo Fighters, Allied forces were seeing discs and spheres and balls of light, lots of reports of metallic spheres. And if we look at the morphology, one of the most common morphologies of UFO objects, even from Arrow have said, you know, this is the most common. And we see it in the UK. There's lots of work being done at the moment with sphere networks, and a British researcher that's talked about that quite recently on the Chris Ramsey Area 52 podcast. Go check that out. That was really interesting. So we know that metallic spheres are all over the place, going back decades, if not centuries. So that's why that's interesting. The problem with this case is that we don't really know who's testing it and what's being tested because of that chain of custody, and it needs to be really, really scientific. And this is a criticism that we gave to Jaime back in the earlier days of the Nazca mummies, where things were just, you know, it was just done in a basement, you know what I mean? It was, but since then it's really progressed, and they've gone, okay, scientists, come on over and check it out. And we've had some really credible people. You know, we've interviewed a scientist who's super credible, and you know, he's an expert, and he's saying, look, this is at least a new species, if not non-human. And really compelling stuff. And it's got more and more scientific as time has gone on, and people are paying more and more attention to the Nazca mummies. Go check out Jesse Michael's recent mini documentary where he went out there and did some great work on it. So if we look at that situation and then we look at this one, how can you get resin from a Buga Shpere? So the resin supposedly is resin that holds together the fibers within this sphere, or on the exterior of this sphere, and that's been sent off to this lab. Some concerns around the report. There's some spelling mistakes in the report. Having spelling mistakes in a report doesn't necessarily mean that the report's not genuine. I mean, I make spelling mistakes all the time. I'm dyslexic. I've got a qualification in electrical engineering, so you know, I know a bit about electrical engineering. I make spelling mistakes all the time. That doesn't really mean anything. Having said that, we don't know where the resin has come from, right? So this is the point. Can you get resin that's 12,000 plus years old? Well, yeah, you can quite easily. You can get it from archaeological digs, you can get it from museums, you can get it from on the you know, civilian market by buying old gems. There's all sorts of ways that you could get a small sample and attribute it to this object and send it off to a legitimate lab, and a legitimate PhD does the test on it and gives you a report back and says it's 12,000 plus years old. Incredible. But we don't really know the chain of custody of this sample. So that's kind of the problem that we're getting with this, and it's rare that you would get a case that's just perfect chain of custody, and that's the problem in ufology, isn't it? What's the chances that a Buga Shpere is just going to land at Harvard University with, you know, the head of resin sampling for carbon dating? Like, it's not going to happen, is it? So, not that there is one of those, but you get the point I'm trying to make. And I think that's the criticism that we levy at Jaime Maussan, is that his sort of his way of being very dramatic and sensational is very old-fashioned in ufology, and I don't blame him for that. You know, he came up in a world when that was how you presented things to the public to gain that traction. And things have moved on since then, and we're heavily critical of that style now. And it's all about, no, what's the, you know, we're all going to analyze this, and the debunkers are going to analyze it, and then we're going to try and rebunk it, and then, you know, if we're lucky, some scientists and some experts will get involved, and then they'll do their own version of debunking or rebunking, and then we go around in circles. And that's, you know, I don't know when ufology will change to be able to have some sort of common consensus of, look, this is legitimate and this isn't, this is worth paying attention to and this isn't. So that's where we are at the moment. There are some criticism of the sort of Mexican labs and Peruvian labs that are doing some of the testing of the, this and the Nazca mummies as well. And I think that there's an element there of like, they're not American, so therefore we don't have to pay too much attention, or those universities where things are being tested aren't as credible as our universities in parts of Europe and in American stuff, which feels a little bit dirty to me. I don't like that. Why do we give less credibility to a PhD in the States than we do to a PhD in Mexico City, for example? I think that's a bit strange, and there's probably some underlying issues there. Either way, there's an issue with this object. It's worth paying attention to, but equally it's worth giving skepticism to, and to follow the scientific method, and to encourage them to be more scientific, because we've got very little hard samples of whatever these spheres are. So if somebody alleges that they've recovered one, we should be paying attention to it and either ruling it in or out. That's my thoughts. So I'm not endorsing anything. I think it's really interesting. I think we should pay attention to it, but I think we should hold them to high standards in scientific researching of those objects. At the moment, we're still not quite there, but this is interesting, an interesting development. Let's follow it up. All right, cheers guys.